So, back when, a little background, back when I was going to Central Washington University to complete my computer science degree, I dug my tea out of storage after almost 7 years. And I found out that I'd pretty much started, it was like all my hobbies that I had as a kid had just been put on ice, and then they rethought and they were right back where they were supposed to be. Which is, I want to write the kind of game that I really wanted on the TI and never had because I didn't, because they didn't make them, And in the 80s and 90s, the Apple, the Commodore, all of those computers had computer role-playing games. And they were very extensive, they had a lot of depth, they had characters and stories. Probably the most well-known one of the era was Ultima by Lord British. And none of these, not on the TI. The TI only had 2 CRPGs of note. One is Tunnels of Doom, which as we all know is awesome, which is more of a dungeon crawl game, kind of more like a Rogue, a procedurally generated random game. It's not very complex. Legends was the other one, which is also good. It is a clone of fantasy, but given nobody else was cloning fantasy, it actually was quite original in that regard. The CRPG Addict actually rated it higher than Tunnels of Doom because he thought it was actually a better role-playing experience. So, pretty much since 2005, when I finished my degree, I've been working on and off on a CRPG for the TI. I have no excuse why it's taken so long. I think a big part of it was I was stubbornly insisting to try to keep it to fit in the 32K RAM. Once I gave up that idea and started using the SAMS card, development just flew. And to be honest, we need software on the SAMS card. We need something to give you a reason to buy a SAMS card. Or to force guys to, like Eric Peel is working on his tiny PEB that will have SAMS support. We need something like that to drive it to completion. So, we'll take a look at the game first. And then I will show you some of the stuff that goes into developing it. The title screen, I drew myself. I did not use TI Artist because TI Artist is terrible at pixel-to-pixel drawing. And I basically just wrote my own bitmap editor program instead. This is actually adapted from a piece of artwork. Who is it? It's a famous 19th century American guy. I'll have to find his name here a little later. And I was trying to design it so that it looked not just good in obviously perfect emulation and VGA graphics, but also looked good on the original computer as well. I was very inspired by MXX graphics because they really made heavy use of color mix at not just the color level, but the luminosity level. I was always wondering, if you looked at the graphics, you're like, why were they doing these combinations? It makes no sense. And then you look at it in the original screen and you go, oh, it's because that color is actually darker and you don't see that color at all on the original NTSC. And they mix orange and purple. You would think that would look weird, but it actually blends really well. And it's a definite and delicate balance between something that looks good and something that actually looks good in both environments. So it's a careful balance. You'll notice my font here, I'm actually coloring it lightly cayenne at the bottom and then a little gray. And the same thing here, light and dark yellow with a little green. On the actual screen, you almost can't perceive it, but you just notice that the text is bright at the top and darker at the bottom. And that makes it so it's easier to see the lines when they're running together. Just a little trick. Plus, it actually looks really freaking awesome on that screen. So the game, by the way, the engine is still in progress. I've been rewriting it from my original 32K footprint to actually be for the AMS. At present, the binary is 128K. It probably will occupy just under 256K of the SAM card. So, which is great because that means we'll work on Ericsson's current design. The combat engine is the only part I am still actively working on, so that unfortunately I will not be able to show you today. But what I can show you is the character creation process. So, little bit of gaming design advice. Don't make it so that pressing any random key will suddenly wipe your game out. If you notice, I force you to press proceed before it will actually create a new character. So we'll just say one character to begin with. As you can see, following Tunnels of Doom tradition, if you have a single player, you can make a hero. And the hero is the total GIMP class who can do everything great. So you can use the arrow keys to select the class you want. You're given a little explanation for each one. We'll just go ahead and make a hero. Obviously, manuals will be provided to explain a lot of what this stuff means. Attributes help determine other things, much like I originally was not going to have attributes, but that seems to be an expected requirement of CRPGs, so, and it gives you the illusion of control, I suppose. So, although they actually do have effect. So we'll just name our character. Actually, let's do it like this. 2018. There we go. Yes, we will accept our party. Then we have a nice little opening montage. I'm just going to breeze through it here a little quicker. That basically explains your character, more or less, got caught in a storm and wakes up in another world. And all these graphics...
Has the look of Ultima.
I'm sorry?
Certainly has the look of an Ultima type game.
Yes, it does. These graphics are all derived from the actual game itself. I was inspired by how Don Granros in Legends actually used his graphics to do a mosaic two-dimensional image for that. So after you view all that, then you can actually start playing the game. And there we go. So you can use yours. You can see it tells you arrow keys to move. You can press C to cast a spell. You can press I to look at items. Now, I do what is called in the CRPG business line of sight. You notice my character pretty much see everything around him. And this little arrow here indicates he's actually up one level of elevation because there's actually elevation in the game. But if I walk here toward the dirt path, now I'm not elevated, and I've now lost sight of everything. And then, oops, see, I'm back there. I can see everything. Now I can't. This comes into play later because there will be times where you're walking between objects and you can't see on top of them. But if you get on top of them, then you can see. So your character obviously is coming down off a cliff. There's a bridge. And there's a little town with some wheat fields and stuff on it. So then he can go and he can talk to characters. Oh, well, this apparently is called Althor. And it looks like a little kid. Says I have a funny accent. Okay. You can see that I actually spent a few graphic patterns to give drop shadows. I noticed it actually makes buildings look like they have three-dimensional depth. So, very useful. So there's an old guy at the well. Now, this is where it becomes fun. He actually is a fully developed character. You can see he tells you, hey, I'm Frode, I'm the village elder, and now you can ask him questions. Like, where am I? And as you can see, more options have appeared. So I can say, well, what's the empire? And then going back, he mentioned he was the village elder. And he says, oh, I can identify items for you if you want. And I can go, okay, well, I think I'm done talking to you. So, oh, well, thank you very much. But let's say, oh, I want to talk to him again. Hey, he remembered me. Instead of having the exact same intro as before, he actually says, hey, what do you want now? And ask him about, This is interesting. He's telling me maybe I should go check this out. All right, well, we'll move on. Now, what's this building here? Oh, it's an inn. You go in there, and they say, oh, you can rest you can grab the drinks in the pub, and there's gambling available. If I go into the pub, much like Legends, you can hear rumors. Basically, every time you visit, you can hear a new rumor.
Are they all true?
That's a good question. Is everything true you hear in a pub? Let's check out gambling.
In RPGs, usually.
So, as you can see, I can actually bet money. Hey, I won a coin. You can see there are dice rolls right there. But I think I'm done with that, so I'll just go ahead and leave. Well, everyone's very polite, aren't they? Check this place out. Oh, it's a trading post. Wonder what they have. Well, we can both buy and sell items. Very cool. We have, looks like stones for a sling, arrows for a bow. We have armor, shields, all sorts of fun stuff. Well, let's just pick something up, shall we? Well, that short sword looks good. All right. I think we're good to go. Now, let's take a look at stats grades. So this tells you everything you need to know about your character. You can see he has health 30, 24 stamina, all of his stats, how much experience he currently has, and what he needs to gain the next level. Go to the next screen. It tells you all of his skill levels and various things. You can see, he's armed with a rusty blade, ringmail, buckler, short bow, arrows. And he has a short sword in his backpack now. And here is his spell book that he currently owns. Spells basically come in colors. Gray is the weak spells. And then if you want, you need to find better spell books if you want stronger ones. We're interested in, we got that new short sword. Let's remove that rusty blade. And let's go equip our new short sword. Yay. Now we can kill something. And now, if we check our screen, now we have a short sword. It does more damage and it has a better chance to hit. So, awesome. So now, actually, while we're at it, let's go and see, can I sell my old blade to you? Because I don't want it taking up backpack space. Yes, I can. There we go. Ooh, I gotta fix that at the bottom. All right. All right, well, enough in town. Let's go take a look and see what we can find outside. So you can see this tree is blocking my line of sight, unless I'm right inside of it. And this is actually, I'm not going to lie, the LOS routine originally came from Ultima. I originally had the one from Ultima 3, which was much, it would create like a jagged diagonal line if you were here. But I found that the IBM version of Ultima 4 actually had a much superior version that essentially uses like, if this space is open, then all these spaces are open kind of methodology, which seems to actually produce a much better shot. This is a monster. At present, attacking him will just wipe him off the board because I don't have combat done. But let's take a look. Oh yeah, you just imagine where you stepped off in the battle and then came back and, yep, that was a hard fight. Now this is mysterious here. What's up here? Aha, this is a plateau. You can see I'm back up on elevation again. So you can see being up high lets you see everything at a lower elevation. I can see, oh, there's a forest and there's a cave in the forest that I otherwise couldn't see. If I enter the forest, oh, it's all dark. I can't see anything. But I'm going to see, we got some swampy areas over here. Ooh, walked into the swamp and look, what's that icon mean? It just appeared. That's the poison icon. It means my character is poisoned. And what happens is you periodically lose health while you're poisoned. Much like Tunnels of Doom, you have wounds and you have fatigue. So let's hope that poison fades really fast. Ah, there it goes. But as you can see, I'm slightly hurt. Now, one other screen we can look at is always the party overview. You can see I've taken 6 wounds out of 30 possible maximum from the poison. Well, that's no good. What can I do about that? Oh, I know. I can cast the aid spell, and I heal damage. Look at that. But it burns a little bit of stamina, so now I have some fatigue. And of course, how do you recover fatigue? You go to sleep in it in. There are also potions. Okay, we enter and, oh boy, it's dark. I can't see anything. Once again, let's use a spell. Aha! Now I can see, and I'm in a little boat now. Oops. We've got an underground river. And look at that up here. Oh, there's a campfire, and looks like a surly looking guard fellow. He was easy to deal with. And so is he. Ooh, chests. What do we got? Hey, I gained 200 coins. I found, a sealed scroll. Now that's interesting. And brigandine armor. Very nice. So now, what's the deal with that scroll?
Where'd your boat go?
See, I can examine items, but if I'm not smart enough, then my character's not going to know what they are. I believe my boat is over here. Although I notice my spell is fading. Yep, there it is. Obviously, the glow spell is much weaker than a spell that you can get later that casts light longer. And possibly there might even be items. There are torches and other items in the game you can use if you have a character who has no magic. So, a lot of options. Okay, well now I've got this sealed scroll I'm curious about. Oops. Those flies are so hard to see. Now, one thing I should add is, over time, see, this is the same monster we dealt with before. The game will save your state anytime you enter and leave a map. So the states will save so that when you come back, those guys will be gone. That also means that you can't go stealing from townsfolk and you go, oh, I'm going to just reload the game. Nope. They will remember. Okay. Oops. Okay, he said he could identify items, right? Oh, alright. Comes a bargain for 5 coins. So let's see. It's a spell called Boring Yarn, which copying Tones of Doom, I have very descriptive phrases for things. Every scroll basically is like peace treaty or warring yarn, which means cast sleep on your enemies and whatnot. Okay. I think that's, for the moment, enough of the game. So let's look at how does it all get put together. So I like using Excel for a lot of my tracking of things. This is my data structure sheet. Shows you all the various where things are assigned in various arrays. Like, for example, map header, party data, player data, monster data. Construction of the various data arrays. I find myself altering and referring to this often. We have the various character sets. I essentially have every map can load a different character set, and several of them are not. What's the word? Haven't even completed all of them yet because I need to complete more of the game. So you can see something like this. I've also been tracking how big files are so that I can I have been aiming to try and keep the game so that each disk would fit on a classic 180K double-sided single-density disk. I'm probably going to have to abandon that because I think the game disk is going to exceed it with a change I made recently. Oh well. So, I know everyone's all broken up about that. So this is the interesting part. With the AMS, the way you structure your code is, and I actually derived a large part of this from Art Green's Ragtime Assembler, because he wrote up some pretty good documentation on how he would do segments. And while I don't use his assembler, I can at least kind of learn from it. And a big part of it is you think of your code as segments of memory, and you decide on a size, and then you try to put your code into the different segments so that you can swap them in and out. So the way mine works is that the upper 24K of the 32K RAM is occupied by two segments, 12K each. One is always present. That's the root segment here. It contains all the most common routines in the game. And then there's like the start segment, which has character creation, title screen, music playing, all of that. Travel segment, which is moving around on the map. Manager segment, which is the transactions when you talk to an NPC in depth or you look at your stat screens. And of course, combat. And worst comes to worst, if I had like anything where I was spilled over the 12K I have with each one, I would just try to create a new segment to hold stuff. You can see we also have character data, music data, name, items, spells, sounds, all of that. I used to put a lot more data into the VDP. Now it's mostly empty. I am using enhanced graphics mode, which is basically bitmap with a single table. That means I am limited to 8 sprites maximum, but that's okay because I don't actually need that many. So, and let's see. Moving on. So, most of my development I actually write in TextPad. It's my favorite text editor. I wrote myself up a little TMS990 syntax file so that it will highlight the various operational keywords. It's tricky, but I figured out how to do it so that comments are always colored, although it's a specific column they have to be on. But that mostly works. And then that way I can have my code so that it's nice and readable. Mind you, IntelliJ looked good too. So, this, by the way, this little program here, this is the loader program I wrote. The game does load in Extended Basic as well as Editor Assembler, something I really wanted to achieve. So a big part is how all this comes together. Now, I use an older tool that's called A99. It was apparently written for the Amiga back in like 88 or 89. I actually do have the source code for it. Joe Delecto gave it to me a while back. And it was originally written by Al Beard. And so I have a 64-bit version of A99 that I use to do all my compiling into object code. And then I wrote my own routines in C# to convert the object code to binary. And then I have a binary to file copy. So essentially I have this nice little build command that builds my modules, copies the data, and then copies it into my program file directly based on size. And that way I can basically click one button and it builds my latest version of code and puts it right into the executable, and I can load it right up, which I really need for debugging purposes because it just makes it ludicrously fast. The other aspect of it is about the content of the game. This is trickier. So my map headers are one of the few things that are still actually stored in a singular file. And what I do is I actually have a spreadsheet, which I will show you eventually. You can see I have I'm using the dec to hex converter in Excel to convert the data. And I just basically store all of my various data bits about the maps, and then I just do a copy and paste into a TI file directly using a hex editor. This is a little primitive, and I might eventually try to convert this into something like a text file, because that's what I've done with my other stuff. The meat of the game is really in transactions, and transactions are, I've written my own scripting language that the TI interprets. It's basically a single word-based scripting language. And you can see here, I was actually very much inspired by the Adventure Editor's tools, that it uses question marks for queries and exclamation points for actions. So, like for example, when you meet the sage, it says, check local flag 0. Is it 0? If and the idea is that if it's true, it moves to the next it moves to the next line. If it's false, it jumps to the label that you've specified. So if it's false, it sets the flag to true, and then you get the opening intro sequence of messages. But if it's false, then he has his, you've already visited me speech. And you can see then it moves into adding options and giving you the option to select something. So large part of the game is definitely going to be debugging a lot of this, but an early problem I had was I had all my messages in separate containers, and I had to individually assign everything. I literally was putting like message 5, message 203 here and there, and it was becoming extremely hard to make minor changes. So I decided I needed to fix that. Plus I found out loading stuff individually from files for dialogue did not work. So instead, everything is compressed and essentially read in by sector. I basically say, go to sector N, read this many sectors of data, and here's the offset to start at. And that way, it basically just stores everything that way. One continuous block. So, this basically becomes... I really should have had that open already. We have the transaction output file when I run my C# tool here, and it tells you, just for your own information, like this is the starting sector, this is the number of sectors, and this is the offset. Or actually, wait. Starting sector, offset, sector count. My bad. And then, if you actually look at the output... In there, thank you. This is actually all that data compressed and ready to read. All my text is compressed using a algorithm of substitutions. So it gets it down about 30% in size. So it works pretty well. The other aspect of it is the mobs, which are mobile objects that are on the screen. Mobs are basically, say, like exits on the screen, monsters, and stuff like that. I always throw a couple empties on certain maps because it will randomly spawn new monsters and add them into the empty slots. But it can only do as many as actually are existing on the disk. So you have to give it a little room to grow. You can see with mob output, same thing. It's basically, it used to be individual records, but now it's big old block sectors because I had to encode text in. And we look at the binary of that guy. Yep, it's pretty much unreadable, but but it's pretty tight. I believe the files like transactions, you can see the output file is only 55K, and the mob output is only 14K. So that's actually pretty tight for an old game, and this is basically a quarter of the game right there. So, and let's see. We'll take a quick look. I believe it was Thomas Moran. That was the artist. This is the original. Yeah, please open in photos. This is the original photo I used for the title screen. Yeah, it looks better here. But he definitely does good stuff. Like, I wanted that kind of sweeping landscape shot. So, and I think that should pretty much conclude. Are there any questions?
It's pretty awesome. Is that compiled binary of the game logic that compile into a bytecode then, basically?
Yeah. Yep, it does. And then I just copied it into the actual game files so that I can essentially, again, run one command file and it sets it up. It's actually pretty cool because I can actually do it on the fly. I can rebuild like mobs and transactions and still be running the game, and then it will just load up the new data.
Oh, nice. That's great. If you're getting memory management.
Yep, that was the tricky bit, but
I was going to ask if the AMS card routines was pretty difficult.
Yeah, it definitely took me a little bit to get my head around it, and especially, I can show you in code real quick here. I use a little BLWP routine to separate out my stuff. I essentially have page swap routines called page 1 and page 2. Almost all my data swaps are for data, so these only swap into the lower 8K. So it's page 1 and page 2. And like, for example, there's enough items in the game, I can't actually get it all in one page, so I have to use both pages at once to have a continuous run, because I don't want to use the upper memory for that if I can help it. The upper memory is occupied by the modules. Part of the game design is definitely you have to manage the memory a bit yourself. I mean, ideally, you want something like what Art Green was trying to design, where you're removed from that process, but his stuff was definitely heavy because he had it that you didn't know it, but your code was actually going and switching pages and changing segments behind the scenes. Because when you called a routine, it literally changed all that. And I didn't really want to get too heavy into writing memory management tools. Sort of the same thing with, I probably should write my own compiler instead of use A99. Probably.
The hard part is the linking to identify the memory segments and their purposes. And you've basically written your own linker to put this info in the binary.
Exactly. Yep, exactly right. So, like for example, in some of my code, I've had to put in dummy values. Like, I think in combat, oh no, not that one. I've had in the past, I've had the alteration spells because they exist both places, but the code lives in root. I have had to actually have it so that I have a dummy value. You can see there's zeros in there because those routines will never actually run in this module. And you kind of have that same problem where you have you throw in a reference just so it has something. And as for when I plan to have it done, I am aiming for the end of the year.
Nice.
Tentatively. You never know. Real life interferes all the time, but that's my goal.
Looks great so far.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
All right.
I like there's the sense of tunnels to do, and there's the sense of the other stuff.
Yeah.
It looks good. The color thing on the font really does.
Yeah, it pops.
Difference. It's weird.
Yeah. That's Bitmap, man, I love the graphics. And that's, I think, one of the other aspects of it is a lot of 99ers haven't really made full use of bitmap.
Yeah.
In fairness, it's because, like on the old cartridge design, they didn't have the memory to really make full utilization of it.
Yeah.
So that's why when you have more memory, it's like you could just shove it all to VDP. So,
Awesome. Thank you.
all right.